You also like the naturalist school when you're talking
yeah,
about,
sure.
You write so beautifully about Louisiana and now
Yeah.
Texas. I was wondering if that particular school of literary description, if they're, well, why do I say school? But obviously you like writing about not only these moral and ethical issues and about relationships, but you really love writing about the environment, the ecology in which everybody is operating.
Well, the naturalist gave us a great stylistic and philosophic gift in narrative art. Namely, they believe that the environment itself becomes almost a protagonist or antagonist. And Steinbeck, for example, was ignored by many critics and academics for years. I think by and large he still is. John Dos Passos. But these guys were titans, and what they left behind for the rest of us was of enormous benefit. I think that John Dos Passos, for example, is just one of the greatest writers in the English language of all time. And he's not given the credit that is his due, because his politics were certainly in everything he wrote, but his writing, like Orwell's, went beyond his politics. Orwell, of course, was a tremendous writer. His homage to Catalonia and his essays looking back on the Spanish Civil War and How the Poor Die and Down and Out in Paris and London. These are the great conchable pieces, works of conscience of modern times. A fellow who used to travel around on the lecture circuit in the 50s, Douglas Hyde. He used to be editor of the Daily Worker and changed his views and became disillusioned with socialism or communism, was once asked what kind of fellow Orwell was, because Orwell was in the party, during the 30s for a while. And he said Orwell was distrusted because of his perception and his ear for manipulation in language. They didn't trust him. They knew how smart he was. And of course, Orwell, fought with the International Brigade and was severely wounded, shot through the throat. And he became disillusioned also with communism as a result of what he saw in Spain. My favorite Orwell story, he was shot from a mile out by a fascist sniper. And he thought he was safe that day. He was cleaning his clothes. He was picking the lice out of his blouse. And he was hit from a mile out. When he was being carried away, the only thought, he said, that went through his mind was, "My God, what a splendid shot." It's typically British.
It really is. You seem to have a tremendous affection for the Cajun and the Cajun culture.
Oh, yeah.
So when I was saying descriptive powers, I guess I was referring in part, to just describing the countryside.
Yeah.
But in part, certainly, in bringing that marvelous culture alive. Is there some selection, perhaps, from Sunset Limited that you might choose to read that would...
Sure.
I first met you, there's no way you'd remember this because I was out in the starstruck audience, but you were the guest of honor at the second Left Coast Crime Conference in 1992 in San Francisco.
That's right.
And you did a reading that I have never forgotten.
That's very nice.
I was just electrified. And when I read your books, I hear your voice.
Well,
and it seemed to me that it would be very nice to leave our viewers today hearing your voice, reading your literature.
I just happen to have this book with me.
What a stroke of luck!
This is from the first chapter of Sunset Limited, and Dave Robichaux is telling us how he is about to step in media res, in the middle of things. I had seen a dawn like this only twice in my life. Once in Vietnam, after a bouncing Betty had risen from the earth on a night trail and twisted its tentacles of light around my thighs. And years earlier, outside of Franklin, Louisiana, when my father and I discovered the body of a labor organizer who had been crucified with 16 penny nails, ankle and wrist, against a barn wall. Just before the sun broke above the Gulf's rim, the wind, which had blown the waves with ropes of foam all night, suddenly died, and the sky became as white and brightly grained as polished bone, as though all color had been bled out of the air, and the gulls that had swooped and glided over my wake lifted into the haze and the swells flattened into an undulating sheet of liquid tin dimpled by the leathery backs of stingrays. The eastern horizon was strung with rain clouds, and the sun should have risen out of the water like a mist-shrouded egg yolk, but it didn't. Its red light mushroomed along the horizon, then rose into the sky in a cross, burning in the center as though fire were trying to take the shape of a man, and the water turned the heavy, dark color of blood. Maybe the strange light at dawn was only coincidence and had nothing to do with the return to New Iberia of Megan Flynn, who, like a sin we had concealed in the confessional, vexed our conscience, or worse, rekindled our envy. But I knew in my heart it was not coincidence, no more so than the fact that the man crucified against the barn wall was Megan's father, and that Megan herself was waiting for me at my dock and bait shop 15 miles south of New Iberia, when Cleet Purcell, my old homicide partner from the 1st District in New Orleans, and I cut the engines on my cabin cruiser and floated through the hyacinths on our wake, the mud billowing in clouds that were as bright as yellow paint under the stern. It was sprinkling now, and she wore an orange silk shirt and khaki slacks and sandals, her funny straw hat spotted with rain, her hair dark red against the gloom of the day, her face glowing with a smile that was like a thorn in the heart. Cleet stood by the gunwale and looked at her and puckered his mouth. "Wow," he said under his breath. Well, thanks very much for having me on the show.
Bravo, Jim.
Thank you.
A great literary voice. What
Well,
a treat
thanks.
for all of us to be able to hear it. Rush to your nearest library or bookstore, because not only are all the Robichaux 10, correct? This is the 10th?
That's the 10th, yeah. And excuse me.
Perfect. I was just going to say, not only are all the Robichaux and Cimarron Rose available, but happily, despite the Gethsemane you walked to get all those original books published, they're now available again.
That's right, trade paperback.
Thank you, Jim, very much.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks, all of you. Join us again. Thank you. That was just brilliant.
Oh, it was great, Barbara. It was a swell interview.
Thank you. I hope this evening.